Welcome to our demo session about the ONE GUI. ONE GUI is used as job and farm monitoring for job-oriented file-based processing tools. Can we get our slide? Can't see it. Okay. Yes. Let's jump to our next slide. So here we see some use cases for what ONE GUI could be used. For example, it aggregates jobs from different farms in one monitoring flow. Let's go to our next slide. Here we see an overview of the possibility of all connectors. Today with us is Michael, who is the developer of the ONE GUI. Michael, can you
Hello.
hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Nice. So, Michael, let's start with our demo.
Absolutely. Let me just, okay, perfect. So, and the first thing you have to do, obviously, is you would have to log in and then, oops, go away. Okay. As Simon said,
We see here. That's the dashboard.
yes. And pretty much, it's pretty much your entry page into ONE GUI. As Simon said, it's basically a monitoring tool that allows you to monitor jobs from third-party systems which do some sort of media-based file processing. So looking at the start page, what do we see? We see a list of jobs and some information. And if we maybe go at the very first step to this column to the right over here, we see a list of different systems, and we can click here to get an overview over which systems are integrated in that current installation. And as you can see, there is quite a bunch of them, and also from different vendors. For example, we have 2 harmonic WFS farms in here. We have mock speed rail farms in here, but also, of course, Cambria FTC, a Vantage farm as well. And as new additions in the program, we have Pulsar by Venera, which is a quality control software, and we have Woody Intuit for ingestion, basically. So that gives you a good idea of the kind of jobs that you might be able to monitor from within this one single user interface.
So, Michael, I assume there's also the possibility to filter.
Definitely. So first of all, what do you actually see? Basically, you see the names of the job as they are named on the respective third-party software. You see a progress, a status, when was the job created, if it has one, what's the priority, also a message, which is usually based on so the content of the message is based on the third-party software. If we take, for example, WFS by Harmonic, if we have an active transcoding job, what we see here is pretty much a preview image. In the case of Pulsar, for example, the quality control software, we see we get a path to the now I can't think of it to the file which contains the analysis information from Pulsar itself. And then, of course, to the right, you have the system. Sorry, go ahead.
How I can get more information of a process?
I'll tell you in a second. So maybe just quickly go. Let me just quickly go to filtering, maybe. But basically, no. Let's go with more details first, because why not? I already did it for the harmonic job in this case. For example, you can click the job and then you get additional information. In this case, you get information about what tasks the job consists of and what the status is for each of those tasks. So in this case, we have an active job, which is fairly early in its state. So all of the tasks are in their early stage as well. I think I have something that's a bit more interesting. Yeah, this one here, for example, in Woody, gives you a list of 6 steps that make up the job, or 6 tasks, as we call them usually, which consists of, starting with getting the file, analysis, up to ingest and delivery and post-process step. And then, depending on the connector or the third-party system, you can go ahead and click on those tasks as well, and you get some additional information. In this case, on which machine was the work done, and just a status message that the third-party software sent back to us. If we, for example, looked at a WFS job consisting of 2 tasks, if you click the exporter task, you get a bit more information than you did for Woody. So it always depends on the kind of job and which software it came from. If you want now to go ahead and do the filtering, as you asked me earlier, you certainly have that option. So one of your operators might be interested or might not be interested in the jobs from all the systems. They might just be interested in the jobs, in the Pulsar jobs, for example. Then they could go up here, for example, and click on the Pulsar name, and then they get the list of all the Pulsar jobs. And what they can now see, for example, is that there is a whole ton of jobs that failed for some reason. What they could do in this case would be they could click that job, and down here in the bottom of the screen, you see an error message explaining what the issue was with that job. So in this case, stream path was not accessible, so it was clearly an issue with the file there. And that's the reason why that job failed. You could then, of course, go ahead and do additional filtering. Maybe you're only interested in the jobs that actually failed. Then you could filter even more and then basically reduce the size of your list down to the information that you are interested in. The same works for the names, for example.
I can get much of details of all systems. What can I do if a job failed?
If a job failed, it depends on the third-party system. But in some cases, let's take Cambria, for example. Let me check. I need to make sure I find the right job. But basically, one thing that you can do as an operator, if you have the permissions to do so, but we'll get into permissions later, is you have some basic control over a job. So there is this context menu that you get when you right-click a job that actually supports context menu, like a WFS, for example, or the FTC. And then you see a bunch of options like set priority, requeue, resume, pause, abort, delete, giving you, as I said, the option to interact with that job. So in this case, we have, I'm not sure if it will work because I'm not sure where that job came from, if it was the farm that is currently active or not, but let's give it a try. Can't hurt. You could go ahead and say, okay, something failed. There's some sort of issue. I fixed the issue. I'll go back to that job and requeue it. And up here, well hidden, it says the requeue succeeded. And then we see, okay, the job just got added to the queue again. And it's basically retrying the entire thing. What you can then, of course, do, for example, is, okay, that's going in with priority 1. That's not what I want. I don't know, I don't care about the job too much. Let's go to priority 5. It takes a second to update, but basically now if you looked on the Cambria installation, or the Cambria FTC job overview, you would see that job having been activated again and the priority changed. In this case, it failed again because we actually didn't go ahead and fix the underlying issue, but you get the idea, I think.
Okay. Next topic. As I know, there is a statistics view. Can we get an example?
Yes. So as an operator, you have the option to get a bit more information if you want to. For this example, or in this case, I have to switch to a different installation actually. And that installation is somewhat spoilering you already. That is not the intention, but it doesn't matter too much. So we have a different installation right here. And here we have, for example, a statistic view, which basically opens up a new window and gives you the option to view certain statistics based on the jobs that are in your systems. You could, for example, go ahead and say, okay, please show me all jobs, the number of jobs based on their system. And then, I don't know, let's maybe go ahead and do a bar chart. Let's not set a start date because we want to get the information about all the jobs since we started using the software. And then you click on go, and then you get this view down here, which shows you the amount of jobs, the job distribution amongst the different systems. So in this case, as you can tell, there's a whole ton of WFS jobs and hardly any Vantage or Mock or FTC jobs. But yes, and then of course you have different things you can view, like what percentage of jobs per system failed for whatever reason, what's the average queue time, and those sorts of things.
Thanks, Michael. There's also an interest browser.
Yes, maybe if you allow me, I would first talk about how we call it internally before I head on over to the ingest browser, because the machines view is something that's pretty much integrated in the ONE GUI package, and this browser is something super fancy with software that does originally not come with ONE GUI itself. So let me just head over to the machines view. So something you can do is, as you saw, we have WFS farms. And your operator might be interested in what is the status of that farm. So you could go ahead and click on the what we called harmonic WFS2 farm in this case. And then again, this window opens up, giving you information about the status of your farm. So in this case, we have just a farm with 2 nodes pretty much, with one of them acting as controller. And you see some information like, okay, what's the IP of that machine? What's the current CPU usage? The task column is very interesting because it basically gives an information about how many tasks are running on that node at the moment. So in this case, it's 0 because there are no jobs running there at the moment. But still, if you then clicked on one of those nodes, you would get some information about its services and their status. Okay, apparently this node has a bit of an issue because all of the services are offline at the moment. Then you could even go ahead. If there were any tasks, you could view them here. Then you can go to the properties for some additional information. In this case, there's no free memory. Maybe that's the reason why the services are down. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So you have this view that gives you an idea about what the status of your farm is. And again, this is of course permission based, and you could go ahead and say, okay, only certain users are allowed to view that. If I now continue on to the Ingest browser, so the Ingest browser is one of our pieces of software. It's basically an ingestion tool, and it's a web-based ingestion tool. That means the user interface is web-based. And what you can do is you can integrate that product of ours into the ONE GUI user interface, basically. So if I started up this Ingest browser here, then again, you see the window that we saw so many times before already, where you see the integration of the Ingest browser software. In this case, there's a nifty little tool that allows you, the way it is set up in this case, it allows you to browse your volumes for content. And then you can select that content. And I'm actually missing the browser plugin in this case, which is why I'm not able to view the video. But if that was installed, then we could play the video. We could set our mark in and our mark out. We actually even get some information about the audio tracks, which unfortunately I can't show you right now because I forgot to install the plugin, I'm afraid. But you could view it, you could set your mark ins and your mark out, and you could then start an ingest based on the configuration of the Ingest browser in the background.
Nice. Thank you so far. Let us switch to the configuration options. Certainly.
So if we switch to the admin user interface, so there is some old stuff that's still there, obviously, and there is some new stuff as well. Let's just quickly go over the old stuff. As I said, so pretty much everything that you see on the user interface for the operators is permission-based. So you can set permissions for most things and therefore define which users can see or access what information. Sorry?
Is that new?
No, that was always there, of course. So the new thing is the settings tab over here. We will get to that a little bit later. I'll just quickly fly over the users and groups because it doesn't hurt to remind people about that or show it to people who haven't seen it yet, of course. You can create users. And let's maybe go to the groups first. So groups are basically groups for users. So users can be put into groups. And on those groups, you define what we call authorities, basically, which allow a user of that group to make use of the functionality that is defined in those permissions. That was a bit complicated, maybe. So maybe let's have just a quick look at the users group, for example. If we look here at the user groups, we see a list of authorities or permissions that that group has access to. And we see a list of members in the lower half of the screen. So at the moment, this group consists of 2 users, Michael and Demo. And these users are able to do those things that we see up here. Let me maybe do that. Okay. So for example, we have here this role view tasks, which says required to view tasks of a job. If you remember, we had the jobs. And if you click on a job, you get the details about the tasks, and then you can go into what we internally call task properties, so additional information about the tasks. And you only get that if you have the rights to see that information, actually, which is defined here. If you, for example, remember the context menu we had for Cambria FTC, where I said, okay, it's possible to have some interaction with jobs, but only if you have the permissions. Looking at the list right now, none of the users in that group would be able to interact in any way with the Cambria, with a Cambria job. If you wanted to enable users from that group to interact with Cambria jobs, you can easily do so by adding additional permissions. So in this case, We have a bunch of permissions that control what you can do with Cambria jobs. And then let's maybe say, okay, the group of users, I don't really want them to delete the job or requeue a job, but for some reason, I might want to give them the option to change their priority. And maybe also pause and resume, because why not? Then we can add this. And it adds those permissions, and then users of that group can do those interactions, basically. That's the groups. So, and then, as I said, you have users, obviously, which are within that group. And something nifty that you can do in addition. So if we clicked at the demo user, for example, you can, of course, disable it or change the password or whatever. And then over here to the right, you see a list of groups that the user is member of. In this case, just the user group. And then down here, you have filters. Oh, I actually still have one in there. Let's get rid of it. What you can do is you can go ahead and say, okay, a certain user is only allowed to see certain information. So basically, we are doing something similar to the filtering we did in the front end in the beginning, but it's defined by an administrator and regulates basically what that user is allowed to see. So you can pretty much do additional filtering that you restrict the user to. So what do I mean by that? I mean by that, for example, let's maybe just go with the example you just saw me delete. Let's say for some reason that user is only supposed to see jobs which contain a certain character string. And the example I have in mind is, for example, protest. So if we save this here, then if that user logged in, maybe we can give it a try actually, because why not? If that user logged in, they would then only see jobs which contain within their name the word protest. And then you can, of course, filter by system and even status, should you need to. But yeah, so that is on top of the permissions based on the group. Oops. And then, if you allow me, I would continue on to the newer stuff, to the settings tab over here. If you click the settings tab, you see a list of further tabs, this general one, and then a couple of third-party systems. Let's quickly go over the general. It's not too exciting. Basically, you have here the option to provide the location to your license file. You have some internal stuff as well. You usually rarely have to change that, but you have the option to, should you need to. But something that's, for example, super interesting is this field here, which allows you to configure your cleanup. Basically, let's say at the moment it is configured to delete all jobs that are older than 90 days. Then maybe you're thinking, okay, 90 days is kind of too much. I don't need that, but that much information. I only want to view the jobs that happened in the last 30 days. Then you could simply go ahead and make that change. Talking about the third-party systems, you have a list pretty much of all the systems that you have a license to. So in this case, the license gives you permission to use Capella Cambria, Harmonic WFS, Mock Speedrail, and Taylor Stream Vantage. And then you could go ahead and configure your software. So in the case of Cambria, for example, what you need in order to connect OneGUI with the Cambria FTC, you need the information about FTCs or Cambria's REST API. So let's maybe just create a new one, because we can. So let's add a new one, and then let's make the assumption that's a new farm. As you can see, I've made that assumption before. And let's leave it deactivated for now, because why not? And let's say the REST API is available under this URL and this port. And you also see here the backup API URL. Basically, a lot of users or a lot of customers have two Capella farms, a main one and a backup one. And if the main one dies, it will automatically fail over to the backup one. And obviously, ONE GUI recognizes that situation. Basically, you can provide the URL to, or the IP rather, or the host name to your primary cluster and to your backup cluster. And should the backup cluster die for whatever reason and switch over to, what did I say? The primary die and switch to the backup cluster, then ONE GUI automatically recognizes that situation and does not pull information or the jobs from the main cluster anymore, the primary cluster anymore, but rather from the backup cluster. So this is always, somewhat system specific. And then if we click change, then it's fine. And then maybe down the road, we want to activate it. And we activate it. And then see, for some reason, it won't update this field here. This is a bit annoying, but it sometimes happens, unfortunately. Anyway, now the farm would be active, and in the background, the backend would take care of synchronizing the jobs into our database. And then if at some point you realize, I don't really need that farm anymore, it was just for testing purposes or whatever, you could get rid of it. And then you have the same thing for Harmonic with the different settings to connect to the system, and for SpeedRed and for Vantage and for all the other ones. And the nice thing is, sorry, were you about to ask something?
What's new? I hear
this whole settings thing is actually new, that you're able to configure your third-party systems without needing our support. Basically, in the past, it was necessary to go directly into the database and make some changes there. And now you can just change that via the user interface. And then, of course, the nice thing is, let's say you have those 4 systems, and later down the road you realize, okay, now we have some quality control needs as well, and maybe we need a dedicated tool for ingestion as well. Let's go with Pulsar and Woody. Hey, Xdream, are you integrating those pieces of software as well? And we say yes. And they say, cool, can we get a license for that? And we say, sure, it costs that and that much. Okay, they pay the bill, and we just send them a new license. And then what you can do is you just add your new license. I think I call it something like that, actually. Save. In this case, you have to refresh the page and go to your settings. Then, tada, we have those new systems, and you could go ahead and start configuring them. In this case, they were already pre-configured, so it's just from switching the licenses. But yeah, and then you could go ahead and say, okay, I configured I configured this Woody connector, and that's all the correct information. And then we activate that thing, and we change that. And then ONE GUI would start synchronizing Woody jobs into its own database, and therefore they would show up on the front end.
Okay, nice. At the end, 3 words about how to get the system or ONE GUI running.
Sure. It's going to be a bit more than 3 words. It used to be a fairly complicated process where you always needed the support of us. But now it comes with a fairly self-explanatory, next, finish installer. So making your life easier and our life easier as well.
Great. Michael, many thanks for your demonstration and your time.
No problem at all.
For all our visitors, if you want to get more information, you can visit us at our reception or coffee bar at x-dream.events. Thank you.